Okay, I would at this point in time call the meeting to order. I want to welcome everyone here. Bienvenue à tous. This meeting is called in continuation of the committee's ongoing study into open government, open data. And this is, we have a very interesting meeting this afternoon. This is actually the first time that the committee, and we've had about at least 6 meetings on this study, but this is the first occasion where we're actually going to hear from Government of Canada witnesses as to what is being done, what is proposed to be done, and what plans are are being worked upon. So the committee is very pleased to have with us from the Treasury Board Secretariat, Madame Corinne Charette, the Chief Information Officer. She's accompanied by Stephen Walker, Senior Director, Information Management Decision, Chief Information Officer Branch. We have 2 departments represented. The first department, the Department of Natural Resources. And as you will recall, colleagues, back in an earlier testimony from the Commissioner of Information, there was some, the Department of Natural Resources was out there as probably one of the better examples within the Government of Canada. We have with us Mr. Brian Gray, Assistant Deputy Minister, Earth Sciences Sector, Mr. Bill Merlinger, Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Financial Officer, Corporate Management and Services Sector, and Prashant Shukla, Director General, Mapping Information Branch. And finally, we have from the Department of the Environment, Mr. Chuck Shawgross, Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Information Officer, Branch. So, on behalf of every member of the committee, I want to thank you for your appearances here this afternoon. I want to thank you for your efforts in this regard. And what we're going to do is we're going to have opening comments from each of the departments, and then we will go to questions from members. So I'm going to start with you, Madame Charette. Your opening comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before you on the topic of open government. My name is Corinne Charette. I am the Chief Information Officer for the Government of Canada. I lead the CIOB branch at Treasury Board Secretariat, which provides strategic direction and leadership in the government for 4 policy areas: access to information and privacy, information management, information technology, and government security. And I am accompanied by Mr. Stephen Walker, Senior Director for Information Management at CIOB. Within the Treasury Board Secretariat, my branch is responsible for establishing the overall government-wide strategic directions across the 4 policy areas that we manage. We do this...
Madam Charette, if I may, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but everything's being translated here, and we could just slow it down, perhaps by 20%. It would make it just that much easier for the staff behind you there.
C'est très bien. Merci. Désolé.
It's fine, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. Thank you.
Within Treasury Board Secretariat, my branch is responsible for establishing the overall government-wide strategic directions across the 4 policy areas we manage. We do this in alignment with legislation and in consultation with departments. We also monitor compliance by departments with the policy instruments we publish. The Secretariat plays an important enabling role. We support all departments and agencies through collaboration, the issuance of policy instruments, and by providing ongoing guidance to our communities of practice. Open government has become a topic of interest to both the public and to public servants in all jurisdictions, and as a result, the Treasury Board Secretariat, through my sector, the Chief Information Officer branch, has initiated work to develop supporting strategies. Open government is a new and broad term, which from the Secretariat's perspective, we define as encompassing 3 key pillars or activities in support of the principles of open government, which are already underway across the federal public service. The 3 activities that I will be discussing are those for 1, open data, 2, open information for both public servants and for Canadians, and 3, open dialogue. The ability to provide information which can be easily located and accessed, and if useful, repurposed or reused by the public online, we refer to this as open data. My colleagues here today from Natural Resources Canada and Environment Canada will speak to what their departments are individually enabling in this regard. The ability of a public servant in one department to easily locate and access information or knowledge repository managed by another department and to engage in an online dialogue within the government forum, such as in our Government of Canada Wiki, which we call GCpedia. We call this open information for public servants. The ability of the government to engage in online dialogues with the public for the purposes of soliciting input or feedback, as was done by the Minister of Industry this past spring on his public consultations on the digital economy strategy. We will refer to this as open dialogue. The Chief Information Officer branch recognizes that open data can indeed be further facilitated for the benefit of the public, particularly with regards to the ease of locating data sets of interest and the ability to secure access to these data sets in machine-readable formats. We are also aware of the potential economic and social value or benefits of repurposing data sets by Canadians. The Treasury Board Secretariat is developing a strategy in consultation with a broad range of departments to determine if there are specific goals the Government of Canada should have in regards to open data. These goals would support the identification of and development of policies and policy instruments that would help in the management of open data, open government data in the future. On point 2, open information for public servants is where a forum for knowledge in government has been created, and an example is the widespread adoption and use of GCpedia, which now has over 21,000 contributing public servants as users, and which has been a focus area of my branch since 2009. And we are very pleased with the engagement of public servants across Canada. In fact, the clerk has commented in his 17th annual report to the Prime Minister on the Public Service of Canada, and I quote, "Adopting Web 2.0 technologies such as wikis can help us to improve the productivity of our workplaces and better harness the skills and knowledge of public servants across the country." On the topic of open information for Canadians, the government has made several improvements to ensuring that Canadians have better access to information. Canada has led many jurisdictions in this domain and was among the first to adopt federal access to information legislation in 1983, prior to the advent of the Internet. Since then, the government has taken measures to continue to make more of its information available to Canadians regularly. For example, in 2004, the government increased transparency with the introduction of its first proactive disclosure initiative on travel and hospitality expenses, and made this information available online. Over the years, this was followed by other online posting initiatives, such as contracts over $10,000 and grants and contributions over $25,000. Subsequently, with the adoption of the Federal Accountability Act in 2007, we added 70 new federal institutions under the Access to Information Act and improved the administration of the Act through the implementation of new policies. The most recent policy change to be implemented is a new requirement for the collection of annual access to information statistical data. Starting in April 2011, institutions will start to compile more data, such as the number of pages processed, timelines, extensions, consultations, and delays. Finally, this year, the Treasury Board Secretariat, through the Chief Information Officer branch, has been working with government institutions to post summaries of completed Access to Information Act requests on their websites. To date, a number of institutions, including the Treasury Board Secretariat, are posting these summaries. Today, the government is focusing on new ways to initiate online dialogue with the public. As a whole, the Government of Canada has been increasingly using new ways to engage citizens. A recent example is the cross-country and online consultations process undertaken by the Red Tape Reduction Commission, which started in mid-January of this year. The government is collecting feedback from Canadians and posting their responses online as they come in day by day. Another example, as I mentioned earlier, is the substantive consultations held by the Industry Minister in 2010 on the digital economy strategy, which provided Canadians with a variety of social media platforms to take part in the discussion. Initiatives like these are becoming more common in the government's day-to-day business. The Treasury Board Secretariat recognizes this and recognizes that we need to address information management requirements for such online conversations with the public. We need to ensure that proper requirements are in place for the retention of records, as well as for the management of any personal information provided through these dialogues in accordance with our existing legislation. In conclusion, the Treasury Board Secretariat, and in particular the Chief Information Officer branch, continues to support and enable the evolution of open data and open government, which is consistent with the government's commitment to transparency. However, the wealth and breadth of our information holdings, coupled with the requirements to ensure compliance with a number of our legal and policy areas, including accessibility, official languages, access to information and privacy, and information management, mandates a careful, well-thought-out approach and plan, which we are working on. Mr. Chair, this concludes my remarks, and I would be pleased to answer the questions from the committee. Merci.
Merci, Madame Charette.
Thank you, Ms. Charette.
Resources, Mr. Gray, the Assistant Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Distinguished members, it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak with you today about NRCan's experience with open data. Mr. Chairman, as you said, I am the Director General, or rather with me is Prashad Shukla, Director General Mapping Information Branch, and I'm also accompanied by Bill Merklinger, Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Financial Officer, Corporate Management and Services Sector. We are here to describe the experiences of Natural Resources Canada's Earth Sciences sector with open geodata. First, let me explain that geodata is the basic geographic or geoscience data that describe Canada's landmass. Some notable examples include geological information about the interior of the Earth to topographic information that includes the locations of watersheds and roads. One distinguishing aspect of these data is that they are all defined by a location or a position. Additionally, they are often relevant in multiple applications, ranging from property rights to government policy decisions to environmental assessments to estimating resource potential to in-car GPS navigation.
Founding of the Geological Survey of Canada in 1842, our fundamental objective has been to make geodata publicly available to Canadians in the most useful form possible. In the early days, the most useful form possible generally meant recording data on paper maps. Over time, we progressed to managing our geodata holdings as digital files on computers, although the final product was still in a paper form, most notably in maps. Today, we make raw data accessible over the Internet in forms that can be manipulated, combined, and transformed according to need. While maps remain incredibly useful, the array of tools that can be easily used to visualize trends in multiple data sets is staggering. We have followed this evolution with the motivation of continually enhancing the public accessibility, usability, and reuse of the data we collect. We are proud of our history, which includes some notable milestones. In 1906, we published the first Atlas of Canada in book form. The last paper edition of this atlas was completed in 1993, and in 1994 it was freely available on the Internet. In 1925, we created a national repository of aerial photographs of Canada. Although topographic mapping was started in the Geological Survey of Canada in the 1840s, it was not until about 1950 that a program was put in place dedicated to completing the topographic mapping of Canada. We will complete this program in 2012. In 1998, we opened a digital portal called GeoGratis to distribute various types of freely available geodata. In 2007, we removed the fees for those few remaining data sets that were not free, and we made the data openly available on GeoGratis. In some cases, we still charge a fee if the data is delivered on a physical media. So what has the producing open data meant to the earth science sector of Natural Resources Canada? First, we have realized cost savings because we no longer require production runs of paper copies. We also do not need physical storage space or the vast distribution network to disseminate physical products. However, there are new costs associated with maintaining servers, dealing with bandwidth and licenses, and for uploading data files. Currently, we are also responding to the ever-rising public expectation that all data are updated regularly. If the demand for open data increases, such costs are likely to rise. We have learned that accessible free data are very much in demand. For example, geodata downloads from our site were less than 1 million in the year 2007, and they increased in a 3-year period to over 11 million downloads last year. These are impressive numbers, but they're not downloads of interesting pictures or video clips. These are large, complex data sets accompanied by detailed metadata. This means that they're most likely downloaded purposefully by someone that has tools to manipulate the data and sees potential benefit from reuse of this data. While the download statistics indicate that geodata are considered useful, the economic and social impact of geodata reuse can be difficult to quantify. Because they are open data, we may not always know who the users are, which data they value, and what they are achieving with this data. Conceptually, if we accept that if the original data acquisition was judged to provide value for money, any additional reuse can only compound the benefits. However, to better understand the impacts of open data, we will be contracting a quantitative study on reuse of the data over the next 2 years. With more than 10 years of experience in open geodata, the earth science sector has learned many lessons. Although please remember our starting point. The earth science sector of Natural Resources Canada has always intended that the geodata it collects and manages be used by governments, industry, and citizens. Hence, we have spent much of our history collaborating with other departments and agencies in the federal, provincial, and territorial governments, along with industry and developers to build consensus on standards for geodata. Even when they were only displayed on paper maps, we were doing this. We have also taken our responsibility seriously in dealing with issues of official languages, privacy, confidentiality, security, intellectual property, copyright, and attribution. These responsibilities are somewhat complex, as several of our data sets are in fact integrated contributions from multiple collaborating organizations. For example, the data we have made available through our GeoBase initiative involves data that comes from the federal, provincial, and territorial agencies. The ongoing broad-based engagement effort has been worth it. The standards and approaches we have today are the key to enabling the accessibility and interoperability of the data, and will enable future breakthroughs that are yet to be imagined today, that make open data so attractive. This work on standards will continue, and it continues today. The combination of today's technology, standards, and the data is fueling an increased demand for digital information and creating multiple potential new markets, societal benefits, and opportunities. Importantly, this new world is no longer the exclusive domain of highly specialized technicians, technical experts. More and more it includes members of the general public, many of whom are new to the use of geodata.
In closing, I want to reiterate that from NRCan's perspective, our deliberate and intentional move towards open data was not simple, nor was it accomplished in the last few years. In fact, we have been working through the issues of open data for most of our history, long before the Internet community introduced a phrase to describe the concept. Yet the journey has definitely been worthwhile, and we are beginning to see substantial benefits and new opportunities arising from our efforts. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. We would be happy to respond to your questions.
We're going to hear from Mr. Shawcross from the Department of the Environment.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Chief Information Officer Branch of Environment Canada. As the Chief Information Officer, I am responsible for the management of our computer infrastructure, including such products and services such as networks, desktop computers, mobile devices, email, databases, websites, and weather prediction systems. I appreciate your invitation to appear before you today to discuss Environment Canada's current capabilities in making data available to the public. I would also like to provide you with a Chief Information Officer perspective on the considerations related to technical implementation of these public-facing sites. Environment Canada has a long history of gathering and making weather information available to the public, dating as far back as the 1870s through the Meteorological Service of Canada. As a scientific department, Environment Canada is a heavy data generator, not only in service to weather monitoring, forecasting, and research, but also in subject areas related to biodiversity, ecosystem monitoring, air, water, ground pollution, and climate change. Our scientists have a culture of sharing data and an expectation through collaboration with others that they will leverage the value of their research, generate discussion, and expand their knowledge. In addition, Environment Canada has a responsibility to provide information in a timely manner to citizens to protect their health and safety. Therefore, Environment Canada already supports open data, as evidenced by the 503 data-related resources available on existing Environment Canada-run public websites. Via these websites, applicable environmental data, for example, weather, climate, or hydrology data, are made available free of charge to Canadians. A number of these sites are already configured to provide data in raw machine-readable formats, which means that it can be easily read by other computer systems. Weather data is a vital resource with high economic impact made available free of charge to citizens and businesses, a point I believe that David Eves last week effectively addressed during his appearance here last Monday. Weather data is used daily by citizens, airlines, transport companies, farmers, municipalities, electricity generating companies, utility companies, and forestry firms. This information enhances their decision-making in response to changing weather, water, and climatic conditions. Approximately 50% of all visits to Government of Canada websites come to Environment Canada, with the weatheroffice.gc.ca representing our most popular website. This past November, the site responded to 42.3 million visits, representing 1.2 billion hits, with users downloading 11 terabytes of information. Visitors were primarily looking for their local weather forecasts, weather radar data, as well as provincial summaries with the most popular areas visited being the 800-plus city pages, local, regional, and national radar, RSS feeds, and weather warnings. For the more specialized scientific needs of Canadian industry, including the value-added meteorology, VAM sector, the academic community, as well as international peers, Environment Canada offers the data distribution service at dd.weatheroffice.gc.ca. This provides 24/7 access to numerical weather prediction models, real-time radar data, city page information in XML format, as well as all weather-related text products produced by Environment Canada. Throughout 2010, this site responded to an average of 6.6 million visits per month, comprising 132.2 million hits and serving up 3.2 terabytes of information. In addition to weather observations, satellite and radar imagery, a wide array of other public information, such as water levels, air quality, and weather forecasts for the public and marine communities are also available online. Another important data set is the National Pollutant Release Inventory, or NPRI, which is Canada's legislated, publicly accessible inventory of pollutant releases to air, water, and land, disposal, and transfers for recycling. I believe you've already heard previous testimony from other witnesses explaining how private citizens have recently used this NPRI data to create a web-based, zoomable map presentation of pollutants released by location within Canada. As a Chief Information Officer, there are a number of considerations in technical implementation of publishing data on websites open to the public. For example, we need to have policies, directives, standards, and guidance in place for implementation of an open data covering access to information, security, accessibility, official languages, etc., and to ensure that these are respected during system implementation. We also need to enforce the use of well-structured data and of solid record management. We need to have a well-defined architecture that is scalable, flexible, and standardized. We need to ensure application of open data principles in future systems development and implementation. We need to identify and reserve any needed ongoing maintenance costs. We need to have a realistic schedule for implementation in terms of resource and requirements. And finally, we need to assess the cost, feasibility, and value of migrating existing data sets or information to open data formats. It is worthy to note that continuing advances in computer and telecommunications technologies have made sharing and processing of information easy and affordable in comparison to older methods. The pace of innovation has been and will continue to be rapid, enabled by technology and fueled by easy access to information. In historical perspective, the first ever email in Canada was only in 1985. The first ever web browser in the world was 1992. Facebook only since 2004, and Twitter since 2006. Looking further to the future, there are other increasingly important considerations, namely the requirement for machine-readable formats which enable the machine-to-machine communications. In closing, Environment Canada has been a leader in the domain of providing data openly and freely, and remains committed to continued leadership in ensuring the public has access to Environment Canada data. I am delighted to have been invited and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shawcross. We're now going to start the first round, 7 minutes each. Dr. Bennett, 7 minutes.
Thanks very much, and it's great for you to come and give us an update on the progress. But I guess you won't be surprised that the first question is that is there really an open government strategy for the government? And if so, could you table it with us in terms of what, by when, and how? And that everything we've heard is that unless it really comes from the top that thou shalt be open, that nothing seems to happen. And I guess we're a little concerned that without a real strategy, what, by when, and how, that we're not getting anywhere. And I think that we're a little concerned that even in that the Government Information Quarterly says that we were the best in the parliamentary democracies and are now the worst, and that in the OECD paper from last November, in the chapter on Canada, it goes on to say that in the fall 2010, there'll be a launch of a new portal providing one-stop access to federal data, single window, yada, yada. But it also says exploring the development of an open data policy. Does this mean we don't have an open data policy? And when can we expect the single portal that is in the OECD document saying it was going to be last fall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were a number of questions, so let me just try to take them one by one. Yes, we have been working on an open data portal. We have been, in fact, inspired by the good work and the significant experience of colleagues such as at NRCan and Environment their experience with their data sets and the terrific response that they have and the experience that they have in making this information available. And we did start working on this open data portal early in, I would say, early in the fall towards late summer, and we were at first perhaps overly optimistic as to our speed of delivery. So we had hoped to be in a position to come up with a one-stop access which would allow us to consolidate data sets in machine-readable format from a number of departments and make them more easily findable by Canadians for the purpose of reusing. And as we did this work, we uncovered that, in fact, there are departments making quite a bit of information available from their individual websites. Not all the data is in machine-readable format. So while it's accessible from individual sites, individual department websites, it's accessible mostly from a read perspective, i.e. I can read it online or print it out and read it. But it is not in the machine-readable format so that people can download it and use it in applications and so on. So we started to delve into what would be involved in making a greater number of data sets available in this form. Not all.
Is there a Treasury Board policy, thou shalt have all your data in machine-readable format and in 30 days? I mean, the strategy is what, by, when, and how. So, and what we learned from municipalities is they actually were able to do this pretty quickly and put up a single portal and then populated with the easy stuff first and then kept going. Like, I don't know what the holdup is.
Well, there is no existing policy that says thou shalt put all your data up in machine-readable format. But that's exactly what we've been working on. And
so you're saying there is no open government policy for the Government of Canada?
Open government in...
No, open data. Well, here it says exploring the development of an open data policy. That means there isn't one.
There is an access to information policy. There is an information management policy, but specifically an open data policy that says departments who publish data on their websites must do so in machine-readable format. That policy is not currently developed. We are working on it because, in fact, it has a number of ramifications. So, for instance, if we take other departments, not including NRCan or Environment, which have a long and successful history, most departments that publish data don't necessarily publish what we call the metadata with it. The metadata has to be crisp, has to be to standard form, has to be bilingual, so that when downloading, computers can easily reuse this data. Otherwise, we're downloading data that couldn't really be interpreted or used properly by any programmer or computer. So we're looking at the implications of doing that in a period of fiscal constraint. How can we do that so that departments can release more and more data in machine-readable formats without having undue financial burdens placed upon them in a time where they're asked to do quite a bit more?
So the digital economy release, I mean, I thought there was going to be a release like last fall on the digital economy policy for the government. I mean, it seems what we've been hearing is that we're just falling farther and farther behind, in that when the UK put its data up, it added £8 billion to their economy. This just seems, unless there's a thou shalt, like, do you have, I mean, obviously these are the deux étoiles of the government, and I thank them for, I am thrilled at the cottage to be able to go on your website and find out, whether I need my boots or not. I mean, it's fantastic. But what are the laggard departments, and what does the government do about the laggard departments? I mean, if there's not a policy, how on earth do you encourage the other departments to get going on this?
Well, I would say that departments are making an awful lot of data available online to the public, in either PDF or standard web format. So departments, I think, are publishing, and
They
in
don't
fact,
want PDF. Nobody wants PDF. Nobody. You can't search PDF.
That
So
is
that's
true.
not on. So can they stop doing PDF?
This answer and the 7 minutes is up, and we'll have one speaker, please. The person that has the microphone right now is Madame Charette. Madame Charette.
Departments are making quite a wealth of information available online. Not all of the information is data sets that can be repurposed by computers. So obviously NRCan and Environment are both departments with a lot of numerical data. There are other departments with numerical data, and we are working with them to assess the implications of them making metadata available, which is a prerequisite to making this available in machine-readable format, translating their metadata, and ensuring that they are able to publish both in that format as well as the format that their current website visitors and citizens are accessing and want to continue to access today. So it is actually an important and an area of great interest. We have a lot of collaboration from different departments, but we have quite a wealth of information published online, and determining what are the priorities, what should we move to, how can we respect our official languages, our information management, how can we do this within cost control environments, and we're making good progress. So yes, we thought we would be ready in the fall, but as we continue to work, we know that we've made good progress. We're hopeful, we're advancing quite a bit. And we're confident that when we are ready, that we will be able to provide a product of value. But we don't want to set expectations that we can't meet. So we're being thoughtful, careful, and we have to work through all of our policy areas.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bennett. We're going to now move to Madame Freeman. Madame Freeman, 7 minutes.
Oui, bonjour, Madame.
Well, good afternoon, Ms. Charette, and good afternoon to all of our witnesses, and thank you for your presentations. Ms. Charette, allow me to say that I am astounded. On April 1st, the committee decided it would study government transparency. When did you find out we were doing this? Well, we follow the work of the committee. We follow it regularly. So certainly we read the transcripts of the meetings. At a certain point, did you ever think about the work you were doing to inform us of your work? Because Treasury Board and Justice are two departments which are involved in government transparency. The committee is working on the issue of government transparency, and therefore the department in charge of this matter should have provided us with information with regard to what they are doing. We were told that you said at an international forum in October, and then later at another conference here in Ottawa, in fact, you went abroad and you told your foreign audience that your department was working on transparent government, but you simply forgot to tell Canadian parliamentarians about this. Don't you find this a little shameful? Well, Madam, allow me to say that we originally were to appear before this committee before Christmas. Well, you made all of your announcements previous to Christmas. You did so in October and November. No, that's not true. We did not announce anything. We are working internally. The statements which were made appeared in a report to the OECD in preparation for a meeting. So, indeed, when we were working on that report, we were in a certain state of progress. However, or rather, it was just a status report on how far we were along in this process. Afterwards, we realized that we needed to do a lot more work, that we needed to engage in more consultations before we could make any definite announcements with regard to a date or a pilot project or any other project. My question, Ms. Charette, is with regard to that matter. You are the Chief Information Officer of Canada. Will you commit to briefing the committee as your work progresses on open data? I'm sorry, could you please repeat your question? You're working on open data, open government, aren't you? Yes. Can you please update the committee on a regular basis? We do not like to hear about what you are doing 3 months after the fact through the OECD or through the media. So can you please brief the committee on a regular basis? Certainly, absolutely. We could come back in 3 months to brief the committee on any progress we have made. Where do you think you'll be in 3 months? Well, it's very hard to say. There are precedents. If you follow the work of the committee, you will know that there are precedents in many other countries, be it in the United States or elsewhere. Things are being done in other countries, in the UK, for instance, in Australia. And other provinces are working on this, including Ontario, which appeared here yesterday. I think that there are plenty of examples for you to draw on. So how do you explain that you are lagging so far behind here within the federal government? Why is it that you are not more advanced when it comes to open government? Well, as far as the municipalities are concerned, no, please don't talk about the municipalities. Please talk about the work you are doing. If I may reply, municipalities were out of the starting gate very early with their portals. However, it must be said that their data load is not as heavy as ours is, in our opinion. And based on what we know and based on what we understand, the provinces have not yet launched a portal. They're working on it, but they're not there yet. For the same reasons that we are not more ahead. They are assessing and evaluating the range of data to be dealt with, the impact open data would have on policy, on government. And as my colleagues from NRCan said, it's a lot of work just to keep the data up to date. It's not enough to simply release the information. The data has to be released in an intelligible way, and it has to be updated on a regular and predictable basis. So yes, certainly we are working on all of these things, but there is so much information here at the federal level and so much information which can be released. Our government generates many very interesting products. We also have a policy framework and a legislative framework which must be respected. We have heard from other witnesses, including Mr. Eves, and other people who have presented us with reports, and they have told us that this committee is slowing down the idea of open government. Do you believe that if there was legislation, this would help you move ahead further? No, I don't think so. We already have to work within a legislative framework. We have to work within the Official Languages Act. There is legislation governing privacy and other information. We had the province of Ontario gave an extraordinary presentation and addressed the matters of privacy and so on and so forth. So I encourage you to consult with your Ontario colleagues. Can you provide us with a progress report on the work you have done so far? And can you also tell us what you intend to achieve within the next 3 months? Well, certainly we can prevent you with a plan for the next 6 months. Yes, we would like a written report for this committee on progress made up until now. You have spoken for a few minutes only, but that does not reflect exactly what you have done so far, and we would like to know what you intend to do in the coming months. A plan of action, perhaps, might be useful. Yes, certainly we can give you an update on our overall plan, which contains 5 points, and we can go into more detail. Can you also update the committee on a regular basis, just so we can see that you are meeting your benchmarks? Yes, it would be a pleasure for us to do so. Well, in that case, we look forward to receiving your progress report and looking at the timetable you will set out for your office. When do you think we will be able to receive this report? Well, I think we would need at least a month to put together something for you.
The next member, but I just want to clarify that as part of that last undertaking, your office, Madame Charette, will provide the committee, the clerk, not Madame Freeman, with the full details of your overall plan, as what has occurred to date, which you call the 5-point plan, and you'll give a detailed summary on what has been accomplished to date, and you'll be able to do that within 1 month.
On what we've accomplished to date on that 5-point plan, yes, we'll be able to come back within a month.
Okay. Okay, then. Thank you very much.
I
simply want to make sure that we will receive the report on progress achieved so far. It's always important for us to know what work the Commissioner intends to accomplish within the next few months. That's also important. So there are 2 things we're looking for: progress so far and projected progress according to a timetable which we can follow.
Within the time frame that you expect to do that also.
We will try.
Thank you very much. We're now going to go to Mr. Sixay.
I'd like to conclude by congratulating the other 2 representatives for the outstanding work you have done so far. You are a model for the Chief Information Officer, and I hope that she will be inspired by what you do.
Sixay, 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses for being here this afternoon and for your presentations. Madam Charette, I want to come to you. I want to ask, where did you get your mandate to do this work on open government? Where did you, as Chief Information Officer, who gave you the mandate to work on an open government plan?
We, last summer, we did not proceed on a mandate of open government. We proceeded on a 5-point plan for open data. The Treasury Board Secretariat and CIOB is the custodian of the policy on information management. We're also the custodian on the policy on access to information and privacy. Open data is an extension, really, of our long history in access to information and privacy and proactive disclosure. We are, in fact, still, I think, a very strong world leader in this regard, and we've published much more information than many other jurisdictions on access. In fact, we have been publishing access to information since 1983, whereas, for instance, the UK, they only enacted their freedom of information regime starting in 2005. So I think that Canadians have been well served in this regard. So we were initiating our work on open data specifically. And we were also continuing our work on open government for public servants. So, and that is our GCpedia initiative, which we're very pleased with, and which has, while it has only 21,000 contributing users, is really used very widely by a wide number of public servants to keep abreast and to find out and use repurpose information and knowledge and so on.
So which minister in government comes to you and says, how are we doing on open data, or how are we doing on our open government plan? Or which minister said, we need an open government plan, we need an open data plan?
The Treasury Board Secretariat provides advice to our minister, the President of the Treasury Board, and it is our job to essentially stay abreast of trends and work done in other jurisdictions as well as by our colleague departments, and from that propose potential policy areas and initiatives to consider. So that is what we do.
Do you have a relationship with the Clerk of the Privy Council? And I think you mentioned the Clerk in your statement at one point. So what's that relationship in relation to how this is implemented through government?
The clerk has been a fantastic supporter of GCpedia. So GCpedia is our wiki within the government for public servants, and he has a page of his own on GCpedia, which he shares some information that all public servants can access freely from their desktops, and even initiate some form of dialogue with him, and so on. So the clerk is a strong fan of the internal wiki, and believes it to be a key catalyst for public public service renewal.
Yeah, we've certainly heard how important that sharing of data among public servants is. I guess the question I'm trying to get at is, we've seen with the access to information process how it's very unevenly implemented across government, and different departments have different records on that. Are we headed in the same direction on this? Is it going to be up to individual ministers or individual deputy ministers to drive this open data process within their department, or is there an overall government impetus led by with political leadership that will drive this process across government for some kind of even and coordinated standard across government? Or are we going to have the same uneven record in open data or open government that we have with ETHI?
Well, with access to information, I have to say that our access to information community has done a fantastic job keeping up with an ever-increasing volume of access to information requests, while the resources assigned have grown. There's always a limit to what you can assign. And the policies and the best practices and the instruments we publish in this regard are meant to allow the community to perform to the best possible and respect all of the requirements of the legislation. It is our goal that in the area of open data, we do come up with really a policy direction and standards and best practices that departments will be able to adopt, which will in fact be inspired by the fine work of our pioneer departments like Environment and NRCan. But not all departments have the resources, the skill, or even the experience base that some of these scientific departments have in stepping up to the plate. I mean, not all departments have published the atlas in, I think it was 18-something and so forth, and the first meteorological survey. So, clearly the science departments have a huge leg up on some of the other policy departments.
Mr. President, I would like to add that we have collaborated with the Treasury Board to implement a geospatial standard. So in terms of the data around the geospatial data that is provided, we've had some excellent work go on with the Treasury Board Secretariat, and we have implemented a geospatial standard that allows for interoperability, the sharing of data, reuse and use. We've addressed issues of privacy and those types of issues. So in that context, there is some really good work that's going on.
Madam Chair, I'm still concerned, however, that we've seen this uneven application of ATIP across departments, and you said that there's been ever-increasing demands, and I appreciate that. I have a feeling that we're going to see ever-increasing demands for open data from government as well. So it sounds to me like we're going to be in exactly the same position, that it's going to be uneven, that it's going to be underfunded in some departments, that there's going to be some departments that don't get it, because they've never done it. They don't have a century's worth of experience about why this is important. So what is it that the strategy is developing to ensure that there is some kind of consistency across across government with regard to this kind of policy?
Well, in fact, that's one of the reasons that we've had to step back and really review our policy instruments and our strategy in this regard, because we do have to try and get a strategy that works for the wider community. And it's not easy to reconcile all the variables that you mentioned. However, I have to say that we're quite aware of the focus in this area by this committee, and we continue to work on it because it is interesting. I don't think that it's quite the same parallel as with ETHI, to the extent that I think that open data and the value of the open data portal is that, having done some important work up front to create metadata, translate metadata, make information available in reusable formats, the ongoing constant work is not as high, if you will, because the hard work is getting that data set available to begin with. After that, it's a question of resources, to have the machine resources available to serve it up. My colleague, Chuck, may add to that.
Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, a historical perspective on where we are in Environment Canada. Technologically, people set up these accesses to data, the scientific data on their own portals. They ran them themselves across the department in a very sort of siloed manner. As the Chief of Information Officer, I'm providing the best and most efficient services I can to the Canadian taxpayer. And as part of that, we amalgamate onto fewer servers, less cost for doing so by putting them on these servers. But a natural consequence of that is that these previously available sources of data that people knew where they were get amalgamated into this sort of centralized area. And as part of that sort of progress, last year I realized we had to start putting some sort of registry together so people could find this data, which was now had to be in accessible format, both of les deux langues officielles. So that was where I was exploring setting up a registry. But as you start to look at the technical side, which is relatively easy, you start running into all of the issues of metadata, official languages, all the other sort of policy issues. So that's what was happening last summer. So in terms of actually setting something up technically, reasonably straightforward, but there's a number of issues that come from that. So that's basically, from a technological perspective, how we got there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sixey. Mr. Calandra, 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming, all of you. Mr. Ray, I guess I'm a little bit more optimistic than some of my colleagues. I think that when you consider how new everything is in relative to how old the country is, I think we've been doing a tremendous job in getting a lot of data out there, and what I've heard today has been very encouraging. We know that from the testimony from provincial and municipal governments that the type of data is obviously miles apart. I mean, we heard from the municipal governments that the most popular data is the bus schedule and garbage collection. And very important to a lot of people, but that's a heck of a lot different than some of the data that is being accumulated by the federal government. And also, I'm suspecting that some of the data that we do collect or might be available would also have impacts on provincial and municipal governments. So I'm wondering, are you, by virtue of that, you must have to work closely with them or have to develop a policy that respects their jurisdiction so that we're not ultimately releasing data that could impact negatively on a provincial government. So it's much, am I correct in assuming it's a much more difficult process at the federal government because of those interjurisdictional elements to release data? And a final commentary, and then I'll ask another question, is I'd rather we get it right than rush it and get it wrong. So on working with the provincial and municipal governments and releasing data, are we doing that? And I guess commentary, congratulations on what we've done so far.
Well, let me just, you raised 2 points, and I will ask Prashant to talk to the issue of provincial jurisdictions. But in fact, there is an awful lot of data, and in fact, InfoSource has been, a fairly long-standing and widely available on a TBS website, data that reconciles a lot of information on different government sources or manuals and programs and so on. And we do get quite a bit of traffic to InfoSource, but in fact, and InfoSource itself may not have any provincial implications, but certainly some data does.
Mr. President, I'd like to come back. I think one of the examples that was used by the honourable member was the issue of bus schedules and garbage pickup. There's one fundamental defining element to those, and those are roads. Our GeoBase initiative, which has been a federal, provincial, and territorial collaboration that has been in place for a considerable period of time, does work at a multi-jurisdictional level to actually collect that road data and try to make it as available and as open as possible. And in fact, we do have road data that is open and is shared with municipal governments or whoever wants to go onto our GeoBase website and collect that data. Is the federal, provincial, and territorial process a robust one? It is a robust one. We've had a number of successes in this area. And in terms of how we've engaged the our provincial and territorial colleagues in this context, it's been a very productive effort. With respect to our other federal colleagues, they rely on road data as well. So departments like Elections and Statistics Canada also use this road data, and the use and reuse is generated a number of times across a multiple level of jurisdictions.
Mr. Gray, I'm glad that you're here because there's a few questions I have for you. And I know you were, I think I'm correct in suggesting that you were with Environment Canada, and you had at the time issued a statement, if I'm not mistaken, with respect to the muzzling of individuals. And I believe you explained that there's a process that we go through in responding to public inquiries, and it's timely and orderly, and that the policy has been in place actually for years, and that the policy was used throughout government. I'm wondering if you can say that you've experienced the same type of timely and orderly process at Natural Resources Canada.
Well, I'm in my 4th week at Natural Resources, and yes, we've had several media events since then, and I think it's gone quite well. And I have a few statistics on, like, I still remember what Environment did, but I have a few on NRCan as well. And I'm proud to say that Natural Resources Canada publishes about 900 peer-reviewed scientific papers a year. These come from our scientists. These scientists collectively gave about 600 media interviews last year. We also publish a range of non-peer-reviewed reports that come out either through our internet site or printed media.
Mm-hmm. That's actually quite astonishing. We had David Eves, I know, has been suggested by a number of the witnesses here the other day, and he mentioned that he'd been able to get a lot of information handed over for access to his website. And I note that he was somebody who actually had worked on Mr. Ignatieff's leadership campaign, so not somebody who would necessarily be out to praise the government or the individuals who work at NRCan. And now you've quite clearly suggested that a lot of information is getting out, 900 peer-reviewed. And I am consistently hearing a lot of, they're giving media interviews, they're giving a lot of press releases. They seem to be, NRCan, always available when they're asked to be available, which doesn't square with me on some of the suggestion that people have been muzzled. So again, if you could reiterate for me, so there is an ability for the scientists to speak, to have their information reviewed, for them to approach the media and to talk about the findings that they're getting.
Yes, and I don't have our statistics off the top of my head for NRCan, but the system is in place at Environment and it is in place in our department. The first thing is there's a media request. These are usually time sensitive. We don't get, oh, we would like to talk to somebody in the next week. It is, we'd like to go to press by such and such a time. We want to talk to somebody about topic X. We take great pride in the public service of having expertise, and we've earned that expertise, and we guard it accordingly. And so our job is to make sure we have the expert speaking to the question. And sometimes these questions aren't simple. It's multidisciplinary. You need a couple of experts to come together, and it takes time. And then you have to assure, like any well-run organization, these people are media trained. And so in that process, occasionally something's going to slip through the cracks. And, you know, but all in all, I know when I was at Environment, our stats were very good as far as being able to meet these timelines.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Klender, I just want a question to Madame Charette. Well, we've been at this for about 4 or 5 weeks, and when we've looked at other provinces, we've looked at some of the cities, but we've also looked at what's going on internationally, and United States, Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand. They've made a lot of strides on this issue, and it seems to have been driven at the top. Like when David Cameron came to power, he made a statement, we're going to do it. When Obama came to power, he made that statement, we're going to do it. Within 30 days, they had sizable number of databases on their website, and within 2 years they had over 200,000 databases all in a reusable format. And within this principle, I've listened to your testimony this afternoon. I'm not even clear if we have a policy on open government or open data, if you got. Do we or do we not? And are you getting any direction from your superiors, whether it's your deputy minister or the president, that this is something we should be doing?
There's certainly the Secretary of the Treasury Board and the President is aware that we are working on an open data, a strategy for an open data portal. There's no question about it. We briefed on our plans, our 5-point plans in the summer, and we embarked upon this process, which we will report on. There is no open data policy instrument today. However, we are assessing the requirement for one so that we can potentially provide an open data portal that, that goes beyond 2 or 3 scientific departments, and that provides information of a wide enough range and of a consistent and suitable format so that we can, also be more present in the machine reusable space. But we do continue to publish and have for a very long time quite a bit of information, simply not all in machine reusable format, nor from one point of entry.
Well, thank you very much for that answer. That concludes the first round. We're now going to go to the second round, and we're going to adjourn at around 5:15. Not adjourn, but we're going to suspend to deal with another item for the committee. So, second round, give me a minute here. Yeah, let's, second round, 4 minutes. Mr. Dhaliwal, 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I was on this committee earlier. This is the committee that I was on 5 years ago. And no, because the reason is I didn't see anything to do with the open government. This is the most secretive government that I have seen in Canadian history. But when we talk about today, and there's nothing about the open government, all we are talking about is the open data, and that has nothing to do with the open government principles. But one question I have and an issue I have is, why is the Prime Minister, the office can mesh data on the Google map to promote itself, but the other departments can't to provide a useful information to Canadians?
Yes, Honourable Member, I would just say that every departmental deputy head is accountable for the information holdings of their department and has the responsibility to determine what they want to publish on their websites and how they want to publish it, providing they are compliant with our classical policy instruments for websites, i.e. that they're compliant with official languages, that they're compliant with Common Look and Feel 2, that they're compliant with the Federal Communications Policy, and so on. So it's up to every department to decide that, and they do. The open data portal that we're exploring is slightly different because it is not one deputy head. It's a portal that would encompass and bring together through one logical front door data from a number of departments. And the issue of accountability is certainly an issue that we're needing to work through, because we're going through one front door and we could be seeking data from multiple departments. But every department deputy head is accountable to determine what they publish and how they publish it within policy guidelines.
So why did Canada fallen behind so many countries when it comes to open data process?
Well, I don't believe that Canada is behind many countries. We are behind the U.S. and the U.K. on open data. The U.S. went out very strongly shortly after President Obama was inaugurated, and the U.K. followed shortly after with their open data. But again, from a freedom of information or an access perspective, Canada has been there way before the UK has, and our access to information and proactive disclosure regime is really outstanding, and we continue to make a lot of information available to Canadians. So,
not that we see. My question to Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray, when you say that there is a data available that you can GPS in your car, when I have my BlackBerry and iPhone here sitting, when I can have those Google Maps accessing that information, why the people have to come to your portal to access that information? What information do you have differently than those maps?
Well, the examples I'll start off and I'll let my expert speak to this, but the two examples you gave are applications of open data that are not in themselves. They're an application. They're an end use of that. So you're seeing a tool that's using this open data that someone's acquired to use your GPS system, for example. The data is there that an end user puts together, provides value, and you can navigate in your car with it. So that's the distinction between open data. It's raw data. It's readable. It's not something you're going to pull up on your BlackBerry or your cell phone. It's something you're going to have to download. And companies have used that to make end-use applications on your iPhones or BlackBerries.
Well, we're now going to move to Mr. Abbott. Mr. Abbott, 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. If I may, I just want to spend just a couple of minutes in putting this into context. I've had the privilege in the last few months of working with the President of the Public Service Commission on a project in a developing country. The developing country has the capacity to probably add 30% to its GDP per capita right now, today, immediately, except they don't have a professional public service. And I want to commend you, and I want to commend the people in the public service for the fact that because we have a professional public service in Canada, we have the ability to be able to take advantage of all of the opportunities that we have in Canada, both socially and certainly economically. And I salute your professionalism and the fact that when people approach you, this is not a barbed statement, this is straight goods. When people approach a public servant in Canada, they see themselves as being a public servant, somebody who is serving the public in Canada, somebody whose job is to keep confidences, to make recommendations to the people who are their political masters, and they are. The politicians are in charge in Canada, as should be in a democracy, and they make recommendations, but those recommendations stay behind closed doors. And with very, very, very rare exception do we find any crossing over that boundary. So the fact that you have outlined for us today the reasons, outlined for us today the background, and outlined for us your caution on behalf of the people of Canada to maintain this very important element that we have in our society. 10% of our workforce in Canada, one way or another, is directly related to the public service or our public servants. And they are what makes this place go. So I thank you for that. I'd like to, it doesn't mean we don't have friction from time to time. I mean, of course we do. I mean, that's the human condition. Of course we have friction. Not quite the level of friction that my friends on the other side of the table would like to see, I'm sure. Well, I couldn't.
Mr. Abbott's got the floor. There's no point in this yelling across the floor here. Mr. Abbott, continue with
What I'm interested in is, with taking NRCan as an example, in coming to a point of releasing findings. In the testimony that I've heard up to this point, in the time that I've been in this committee, there is this desire to allow information out that can then be easily I think the word is manipulated, and I don't think that that's necessarily a negative word, but in other words, a PDF that you can't move stuff on. What is your caution with respect to that? Like, if you have data out, how would you see, what would the limits be on the manipulation of the data?
We're not studying or preoccupied with what Canadians would do or how they might use data sets that we would render accessible in machine usable format from this portal. There certainly is no end to, the imagination and the creativity of programmers who can take either geospatial information or statistical information or any kind of information and, come up with a good idea, as they've done, as they've proven at the municipal level in Canada and as they've proven in the UK and in the US, that there are a lot of interesting and good ideas out there. So it's not so much, we're not concerned about how people will use this data. We're concerned about making sure that we can promote data with integrity, that the data that we put out can be correctly interpreted by people of both official languages, then in doing so, we are not going to be, for instance, introducing any security issues into our government cyber framework, that we are respecting accessibility, which is an important requirement for government websites, and that we're doing it at a pace and in a way that departments can continue to fulfill going forward. We don't want to be in a position of publishing a portal with a certain inventory of data sets on one day and having to perhaps take them down because we can't refresh them or the costs of refreshment are too onerous and so on. So we're not really preoccupied with how the data might be, and I don't think that NRCan or Environment spend a great deal of time worrying on that. It's really about ensuring that if we are going to make an open data portal available, that it is a product that is compliant with our legislation and that which we can stand behind and which will be of enduring value.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Abbott. Madame Tilak, 4 minutes.
Bonjour, Madame.
Good afternoon, Ms. Charette and gentlemen. My first question is for Ms. Charette. Being responsible for the development of government transparency and privacy protection, how do you delineate the two? Well, in fact, these two areas are very well delineated in legislation. As far as the protection of private information is concerned, we cannot disclose personal information, and if they are stored, we do so with authority because this is what the law says, and they are stored very securely. We have personal information data banks, and Canadians through these banks know what information is kept and why. If an individual wishes to have access to their personal information, they can do so. So the Privacy Protection Act is very clear on that count. As for the Access to Information Act, under this legislation, there are exceptions with regard to the disclosure of personal information. If an access to information request is made, and if this request includes personal information such as the name of an individual or something about his or her situation, we cannot release this information. I have a second question. You talked about your GCpedia initiatives. As with Wikipedia, will public servants be able to share information on that platform, and how is this controlled? Further, will public servants have access to more information than elected officials, for instance? Well, first, when it comes to the use of GCpedia, we have guidelines on how GCpedia can be used. Any individual who posts information or a document in GCpedia, because this is open to anyone, must do so in an identifiable way. That is, anyone who posts something can be traced back to their email address. So if I post something, that would be traced back to my address within my office. So it is impossible to anonymously post information. There are also guidelines which regulate this process, as well as our Code of Ethics and our Code of Conduct. I understand, Ms. Charette, can members of Parliament also post information on GCpedia? Second question, if somebody makes information public, can the user alone make that information public, or can someone else also withdraw information which was made public by someone else? GCpedia is not public in the sense that it is not available outside of the public service. It is an internal forum, but it is available across all departments. So anyone in Department A can upload a document which can easily be consulted by employees in any other department. That wasn't my question, though. When information is posted by one person, can another person download that information, or can it only be downloaded by the person who posted it in the first place? As for members of Parliament, do they have access to GCpedia? GCpedia is limited to employees of departments and agencies. I'm sorry, you've run out of time. GCpedia is a forum dedicated to exchanging products which are under development. For instance, we are in the process of working on an information management community, and we can upload documents to this forum, and anyone else from other departments who needs to work on this document can access the document, can consult it. Thank you very much, Ms. Taitsilak.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. And thanks very much for being here with us this afternoon and giving us the information on what actually is happening in government here in Canada. I think that we were all under some misunderstandings about actually what is being done, so it will be good to have an outline and to see where you're going. Some of the people that we've talked to, and although we've not talked to anybody who's doing anything on a national scale at this point, we hope to, but we have talked to municipalities, and we've talked to the province of Ontario, and I think they all said that the consultation process was the most important, was getting people involved and getting the public involved and knowing what they wanted to be able to access. And I agree with the statements that were made earlier on too. Totally different kind of data being collected at the municipal level than there certainly is at the federal level. So I guess my question is, and they had indicated, all of them actually, that there are some easy things to start with, and maybe that's where we are now. I'm not sure, but it seems to me, we've got mapping, we've got some data that's very readily available and maybe easy to put on. We don't need to worry about translation for most of these things. Can you comment on that? Like, first of all, how do you think the public will be consulted as we continue on with this process? Are we at the stage where maybe we are picking the low-hanging fruit and getting started that way, which is what everybody at this point has recommended is a good way to get going? And as you continue forward in your process and in your planning, do you have consultations back and forth with the UK, for example, or Australia, who have done things on a national level? Thank you. A number of questions. First of all, there's no doubt that we're trying to work with, as you put it, the low-hanging fruit first. So absolutely, because the data that is readily available already in machine-readable format with translated metadata, that's fantastic, and we'd certainly be looking to put that online first. One of the strategies that we're considering for the portal is the ability to, at one point, use that as a vehicle for users to potentially ask us, do you have information on X or Y if it's not available, whenever we launch. So we certainly would be using that as a way to gauge feedback from the public, as well as we would see by what they might be accessing, what would be the most popular topics or, departments or combinations of areas that the public might be interested in. Certainly the public's behavior on existing sites is definitely, a key indicator of what they're interested in. So, for instance, we can look to InfoSource statistics, what are the most visited sections within InfoSource, and while InfoSource doesn't make data available in machine-readable formats, it's certainly a source of information that we are studying to see from InfoSource where are the visits going? Where, after the home page of InfoSource, where do they go? Which is usually a kind of telltale as to what they're interested in. So yes, it's definitely a multi-phase strategy where we do want to start with low-hanging fruit on a limited way, carefully assess progress, assess how the reaction is, and use that as a basis for justifying, from a cost-benefit perspective, the need to extend that to more data sets and perhaps spend more time and effort getting a broader base of data that we could one day publish.
Okay, Mr. 6A, 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could ask Mr. Gray and Mr. Shawcross to just tell us a little bit about how official languages policy impacts your ability to post open data in terms of your operations, and just what kinds of challenges that presented, how you met those challenges. That's the question.
I'll start first. Natural Resources Canada provides the geospatial metadata that we've been talking about. That's the data about the data that we have, and the documentation relative to that in both official languages, compliant with the Treasury Board guidelines and policy. Natural Resources Canada also provides the ability for Canadians to search, discover, and access our geospatial data in the language of their choice. And in fact, NRCan has worked with Treasury Board to implement what is called ISO Standard 19115, which has been made mandatory to the federal departments by 2014. And now the difference, though, once you get down to geodata is alphanumerics. It's numbers and letters, and that is raw data that is not really accessible to either language. It's a as the computer expert at the end of the table will say, it's a computer language.
Okay, Mr. Shawcross.
Yes, if I just perhaps expand on that. At Environment Canada, all the information is made available to citizens in the language of their choice. A lot of the data is behind what I'd call an API, I think you've heard that before, application programming interface, where you would go and you would have a screen and you'd put in, you're looking for the maximum temperatures for your city in the last century, and you'd put in your city and stuff like that. So that's the interface in both official languages that accesses the database behind it with the numeric data, which, as Dr. Gray mentioned, is not it's not readable, it's just computer sort of language. Just as a data point, when we were looking at the amount of data that we publish, we have about 503 data sets, if you will, that we publish through these APIs or make available in raw format. Of those, about 42 are in what I'd call open data, machine-readable format that we could publish as a true open data type data set. So most of our data is accessible in both official languages, but is behind an API or a programming interface.
Mr. Gray, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that in 2007 all fees were removed from the data sets that hadn't been free up to that point. And then you also said that in 2007 the geodata downloads were less than 1 million and increased to over 11 million last year. Now, is it directly related to removing the fees, or is there something else going on there?
Well, I'll let Prashant answer that one. Thank you.
Certainly, we were of the view, and the policy work that we had done in previous years indicated that price was a barrier to the use and reuse of data. So we are of the view that the price was a factor in limiting the potential download capability. The fact that it increased 11-fold, speaks to the policy